I think we're live. Let's wait for folks to come in. I'm going live on Instagram right now as well. Let's wait for folks to come in. All right, we're going to be doing the astrology of Shia Labeouf. Okay. Let's do this. Let's wait for the fam to come in. We're going to be taking a look at the astrology of Shia Labeouf this morning. Shia Labeouf. I'm also on YouTube. So if you guys want to make your way over to YouTube, you'll probably have a better view over there. What's up, my loves? Grand Rising. How's everybody doing? Hope you guys are having a good Sunday. Hope this eclipse season hasn't been too crazy for you. We're going to be taking a look at the astrology of Shia Labeouf. We're going to be taking a look at his chart and taking a look at some transits and kind of doing a deep dive into who this man is. I am live on YouTube, so if you guys want to join me on YouTube, I'm actually going to be sharing my screen on YouTube, and so you'll be able to see my face, and you're going to be able to see the screen, I believe. Yes, there we go. Yeah. So if you go on YouTube, what's up, my loves? If you go on YouTube, you'll be able to see me and you'll be able to see the screen. If you guys want to go on my YouTube right now and tap in on there, my YouTube link is in my bio and it's also on my stories. Okay. So we're going to be taking a look at the astrology of Shia Labeouf today. I'm going to go to pull up his chart on here. And for those of you on YouTube, if you feel like chatting and stuff like that as well, I'll have the chat window open on YouTube. So I will be responding to people in chat on YouTube as well. Okay. So we're going to be taking a look at, like I said, Shia Labeouf's birth chart today. Let me just go ahead and move some things around. Hold on. I gotta get because I have my notes over here as well. So I'm just like trying to make this. I probably could have got this set up with like a second computer, but yeah. In the future, we'll do that. We'll work on that. Having a second computer. And then I got some notes over here too. So hold on, guys. I'm just getting everything situated. Getting everything situated. Okay. All right, you guys with me? Who's here? Who's hanging out? What's up, my loves? We're going to be going over the astrology, Sheila. Can you guys see clearly? Can you guys see the chart? See the screen? Let me wave at everybody. Hey, Jay. Greetings, greetings. Let's just wave at people. Greetings. Good morning. Okay, awesome. We are live on YouTube and we are live on Instagram. This is my first time doing a live on YouTube, so really exciting. We're growing, we're trying new things. Probably not the best during Mercury retrograde, but here we are. So, all right, we're gonna go over the astrology of Shia Labeouf. We're gonna be talking about his chart today and breaking down his chart, and then we're gonna be looking at kind of like transits. And my goal today is to help you guys understand the complexity of a person. And particularly with Shia LaBeouf, we're going to be talking about parts of his chart that kind of pull at each other, which is why he is a person in conflict. And we're going to talk about certain aspects of his chart that indicate, trouble in relationships, in partnerships, or that kind of hint towards him struggling in relationships. And things like jealousy, things like possessiveness, things like kind of self-delusion. Him seeing scenarios or coming up with scenarios that may not even be real, especially when he's under the influence. We're going to be talking about addiction and escapism and how he inherited that from his father and how that shows up in the chart. I also think that Shia LaBeouf has a wounded man complex or a wounded ego, a wounded identity complex. And we're going to talk about this. I think this shows up in various ways. He kind of has like a manic personality. He has been diagnosed as well with PTSD, which is something that he talks about in his interviews. Um, and he has various parts of his personality that are in conflict. And we can see this in the chart, and I'm going to show you guys this. But yeah, he has kind of like a wounded man complex, and I think it manifests as sometimes narcissistic behaviors or narcissistic, personality stuff that he's got going on that he seems to be aware of, but he also can't overcome at the same time. Um, we're going to talk about his spirituality and his spiritual journey as well, and how there's certain placements in the chart that kind of show us that not only is he on a life of kind of deep spiritual awareness and overcoming the ego, it has to come through a path of kind of self-destruction and self-sabotage. I think this man, one of the things that he says in the interview that he did with Andrew from Channel 5 is, some of us find God by slamming our head into the wall, and some of us are not going to go willingly, we're going to have to go ahead and find God or come to faith forcefully. And God is going to punish us or discipline us or make us suffer until, we figure it out, until, we come to Jesus and wake up. Right. And he talks about this kind of like self-destructive pathway to spirituality. And I think this is also in his chart. I think his chart speaks to this as well. Um, and I think the ultimate lesson, when it comes to understanding Shia LaBeouf and celebrities that kind of do this fall from grace, or they're given the world, but they're still not happy, or they're still not joyous, or they still are struggling with addiction, depression, stuff like this. Um, I think the beauty of astrology is it allows us to see just how human these celebrities are, you know? Um, from the surface, we see success, we see glamour, we see, we see, luxury, we see popularity and fame. That's what we see, right? From our perspective as like, the public. But when you really look at someone's chart, right? You're able to really see who they are, and you're able to see what they struggle with within their own life. It's really gives us the ability to put ourselves in their shoes. It's really understand them from a level of humanity, right? And I think this is the beautiful thing about astrology is, it doesn't have bias and prejudice. Only bias and prejudice that we give astrology is obviously from our own wisdom and from our own judgments and our own opinions, right? Many of us, we have various opinions of Shia LaBeouf. Same with me. I'm very conflicted about this guy. I love this guy, but then there's also parts about him that are extremely problematic. And I think, astrology and our charts really speak to the complexity of who we are, right? Like we're not cookie cutter, black and white people. Like, none of us are exclusively good or exclusively bad, and it's one of the things I say often is that, many times we're an angel in one person's life and we're a demon in another person's life, right? And we all have different roles to play, different characters to play, so, all right, enough about that. I just kind of want to give you guys the philosophy and kind of give you guys my understanding of why we're doing this. And yeah, let's dive into the chart. So, all right. So what are we looking at? We are looking at what we call a pie chart or a circle chart. And this right here is the astrological chart of Shia Labeouf. So this is a picture. What we're looking at right now, this circle graph. This is a picture of the sky at the moment that Shia Labeouf was born. Okay, and so what we're looking at. So this is the ascendant, right? This is the horizon line. This is where the sun rises into the sky. And then this is the descendant. So this is where the sun sets. So what you're looking at is actually a map of the sky, the horizon, the descendant, the MC. This is the pinnacle of the chart. So this would be like 12 noon. This is the top of the chart, the highest point of the chart. It's the most visible point of the chart. And then the IC is the most hidden part of the chart, right? So I'm looking at these black lines right here: MC, ascendant, descendant, IC. And we can see that, looking at so these are called the angles, the cross of matter, right? And the position, the degrees of these angles are very, very important. And what you'll notice is that his rising, right? Sheila Buff's rising, he's a 29-degree Aquarius rising. And 29 degrees is a degree of fame and popularity. It's a degree that's connected to the sign of Leo. So in degree theory, we give 29 degrees to the sign of Leo. And Leo is, the sign of the celebrity. Leo has a lot to do with the sun. The sun is about popularity, fame, recognition, being seen, right? So what you'll notice is that a lot of celebrities or a lot of people that have moments of fame or popularity or kind of like global international recognition, they do have 29-degree placements. They'll have a 29-degree rising, they'll have the MC at 29 degrees, things like this, okay? So then what we're looking at out here is we're looking at all the signs in the houses. So you can see that there's 12 slices of the pie. So this is houses 1, 2, 3, 4, going all the way from 1 to 12. And then every house is colored and ruled by a sign. So his first house, he's in Aquarius rising. His first house is ruled by Aquarius. His second house, right, is in Pisces. We see that he has Jupiter in Pisces here in the second house. In his third house, he has the sign of Aries. This is where we have the North Node. In his fourth house, he has a sign of Taurus. In the fifth house, he has a sign of Gemini. This is where his sun is at. So we have the sun, Chiron, and Lilith conjunction in Gemini. In the sixth house, we have his Venus and Mercury in Cancer. In the seventh house, we have his moon in Leo. In the eighth house, we have Virgo. In the ninth house, we have Libra. In the 10th house, we have the sign of Scorpio. In the 11th house, we have the sign of Sagittarius, where his Saturn and his Uranus are at. And in the 12th house, we have planets Mars and Neptune, and we have the sign of Capricorn. Okay. So when I'm looking at this chart, right, what I'm immediately going to look to is I'm going to look to the sun and the moon, because the sun and the moon in our chart are very important. What we call our big three, the rising, the sun, and the moon, they really set the foundation for the chart. And they're going to tell us a lot about the person, their personality, their identity, their character, their emotional, connection to others, their family, their sense of self, their awareness. The sun and the moon, right, are the luminaries, the life bringers. They have a lot to do with our identity and our personality. And the moon is so interesting. The moon is about our intrinsic personality. The moon has a lot to do with who we are in private. It has a lot to do with our childhood, our past, our family. The moon is about our relationship with our mother. And then the sun has a lot to do with our ego and our personality and our character and our sense of self, our awareness, right? The sun is the planet that's connected to our public image. It has a lot to do with our career, has a lot to do with our ambitions. And it also has a lot to do with our sense of joy. I think the sun and the moon both have a lot to play with our sense of joy, our inner sense of peace and contentment. So in Eastern Vedic astrology, they say the quality of the moon and how well the moon is placed really will speak to whether or not a person is peaceful in their life. Like they just, within themselves, like they're just peaceful and joyous and content, right? Like that intrinsic sense of I'm okay, I'm happy, I'm joyous, or even like the baseline sentiment of someone, right? Is someone baseline anxious? Is someone baseline peaceful? Is someone baseline angry, pissed off, right? Like the moon speaks to our baseline emotional state, all right? The quality of the moon and what's happening with the moon, right? Where the sun speaks to our personality, our character, our self-expression. So it's a very outward, the sun illuminates, the sun projects outwards. So the sun has a lot to do with our ego, our identity, our personality, our character. But because the sun is a very visible planet, it's a very public planet, it has a lot to do with career as well, right? So he has a Leo moon and he has a Gemini sun, right? And it's interesting because he has these planets in houses that are really good for performance, really good for self-expression. He has these planets and houses that are also really great for career. So it's so interesting because we think of the 10th house as career, and it is. But what's so fascinating is when you start to get into derivative astrology, the 10th house away from the 10th is also very important. So let me explain what I mean by that. So his 10th house is in Scorpio, right? If I can't count 10 houses away from his 10th house, we get to the seventh. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And where does he have his moon? In the seventh house. So not only do 10th house planets, the strength of the planet that rules the 10th house. So his 10th house is in Scorpio, it's ruled by Mars. He has an exalted Mars in Capricorn. So he has a really strong 10th house ruler. So that's important, right? That's going to, the quality of the 10th house ruler tells us, if it's in an exalted position or if it's in a strong position, that this person could be very prominent, right? But the seventh house, because it's a 10th house away from the 10th, will also be a popularity or fame indicator. So, seeing his moon in the seventh house, right? This is the 10th house away from the 10th, really speaks to him being well liked and well supported by the public. So you'll notice that when people have moon, Venus, Jupiter, sun in the seventh house, moon, Venus, Jupiter, sun in the 10th house, these people will be well liked and well received by the public. And even if they have a little bit of a damaged public image or damaged public reputation, or if their public image fluctuates, overall they get forgiven. They're given grace. They're given love. They never get fully ostracized or kicked out of the public eye. They never fully get canceled. And you know who else similarly has a chart like this, but it's not. They don't really have. I think they may have some seventh house stuff, but I know they have a really strong 10th house. Is Chris Brown. Chris Brown is he gets, he burns himself down, he kind of self-destructs, he, in his personal life, he makes really bad decisions, and then it affects his career, but then this man always has like a rebirth, And so Charlie LaBeouf also has a chart like this, right? He has a chart of someone who kind of goes through these periods of like self-destruction, and then he goes through like a rebirth. And I think the fascinating thing about his Leo moon, we're talking about the sun and the moon right now. If you look at both of them, okay, they're both afflicted. And what do I mean by afflicted? The sun and the moon are both being hit by planets that are harsh and that are difficult and that are going to create some kind of complex associated with the moon and the sun. So Shia LaBeouf, right? Even though he has this Leo moon and he has a Gemini sun, what I would say is that both his moon and his sun are afflicted. They are being aspected by planets that are going to create very intense problems and issues that are going to start very young. They're going to start from childhood with the relationships with the mother and the father. And I don't know if you guys know about Shia LaBeouf, but his mother was kind of like a vagabond. She was always working. She was trying to keep things together. She was also She was like kind of like a struggler. She struggled. She hustled a little bit. She was selling fabrics. She was a performer. She was just doing a lot of different things. Where his dad was, especially in his youth, was not only a clown, but also kind of like a hustler, a gangster as well. His dad was a gangster, but a criminal as well, but also a drug addict. His dad was a drug addict. His dad was doing heroin when he was in his, around the ages of 11, 12, 13 and stuff like this. So, when he was young, his father was very in and out of his life. He would go and visit his dad in jail, as he was kind of like a troubled youth. And so when his dad would go to jail, he would kind of get into trouble. And I think what's interesting about, Shia LaBeouf's chart, and because we're going to go deeper with the sun and the moon, and I'm going to show you guys the aspects that are afflicting it, is this deep woundedness that he has with his parents and this deep woundedness that he has with his mother and his father, with both of them. And when people have this, right, a wound with the mother and the father, or very complex relationships with them, that could manifest as emotional disorders, emotional issues with emotions and feeling. And that could also manifest as personality disorders, identity disorders, and ego disorder, right? So the moon is the planet of the mother. And when the moon is afflicted or the moon is challenged in a chart, right? A person can have an emotional complex where they have radical, uncontrollable emotions, obsessive emotions, emotions of fear, right? Abandonment complex, things like this. If you're of intimacy, if you're of closeness, things like this, right? And that's going to primarily be indicated by the relationship with the mom, or the experience of the mom is going to really show up or manifest as like our sense of emotion and how we relate to others emotionally. Okay, because that's the moon. That's what the moon's about, right? Where the sun is like our self concept, our the way we see ourselves, our ego, our personality, our character, right? How we feel about ourselves, confidence, joy, things like this, right? But that's taken from the father. So, if we have a disruptive relationship with the father, a chaotic relationship with the father, we're also going to have a disruptive personality or a chaotic relationship with the self, where the identity and the ego is ruptured in some type of way, is chaotic, isn't grounded or focused, right? So, and this is kind of what Sheila Buff's chart shows us about his relationship with his dad is, dad was in and out of his life. Dad wasn't a safe space. Dad wasn't consistent or reliable or dependable. So this kind of created a little bit of PTSD for Shia LaBeouf, where he doesn't. And this we're gonna kind of go over. I'm gonna show you guys clips from his interview that he did recently with Andrew from Channel 5. But I'm gonna show you guys how he has this wound around other celebrities, around father figures, around people that he looked up to or that admired that rejected him. Like he in the interview, he talks about this moment that he had with Mike Piazza, or this wound that he has with Mike Piazza, where Mike Piazza never gave him an autograph, even though he would show up and go to the Dodger games like every weekend. He always wanted a autograph from Mike Piazza. And it's interesting because Andrew's talking to him about this, oh, you never got an interview from Mike Piazza, like, oh, haha, that's funny. And then like Sheila Buff is looking at him dead serious, like Mike Piazza's an asshole. Like, no, like this isn't a funny thing. This is like a serious matter. And I really do think that this speaks to a deep wound that Sheila Buff has around the father. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to draw the aspects for you guys to show you what's going on with his sun and his moon. Because I think the big challenge and the big issue for Sheila Buff has a lot to do with what's going on with his sun and his moon. And this kind of also shows us that we can't just be like, oh, I have a moon in Leo, I have a sun in Gemini, and that gives us information about somebody. I think if we really want detail and nuance and complexity when we're giving readings or receiving readings, or even when we're looking at a chart, whatever, we need to take a look at everything that is happening to someone's sun and someone's moon. And this also, in general, is like you really want to take a look at aspects that people have between planets, because those aspects are going to tell us whether or not those planets, we're going to see the best of them or we're going to see the worst of them. Okay. So let's start off with his sun, because Sheila Buff has got a lot going on with his sun. So he has a 20-degree sun. Okay, 20 degrees is a Scorpio degree. So the sun at 20 degrees already tells me that there's going to be a lot of stuff around death and rebirth when it comes to the ego. There's going to be a lot of stuff around the relationship with the father that's going to be traumatic, because 20 degrees being a Scorpio degree is a degree of trauma. It's a degree of transformation and change. And when I see the sun at 20 degrees, already that tells me that this person, this individual, is going to be going through a lot of identity complex stuff, or really intense. They're going to be doing like deep digging into their soul, into their spirit, into their identity in this lifetime. And they're going to have periods of crisis where they don't know who they are, or they like self-destruct and self-destroy. Like they self-destruct to kind of go through to like shed what is false, like shed what isn't real, and be reborn. So, the sun at 20 degrees really speaks to someone who's on a journey towards authenticity. And the way that they get there is by purging, by going through these really intense trials of either self-inflicted purging or outer scenarios that kind of push them to evolve and change and shift, right? But they're going to be going to the depths and the core of their being in this lifetime. They're going to be doing a lot of shedding. So that's the sun at 20 degrees, okay, in Gemini. In Gemini, right? In Gemini is a sign of communication, right? Gemini is a sign of the mind, the way that we think. So if I see someone with a 20-degree sun in Gemini, this tells me that their primary work is going to be around how they communicate and express themselves with others, and also around their mind, the way that they think, okay, their self-perception. So the sun in Gemini, right? It's really important. This is for anybody that has a sun in Gemini. The way that you think about yourself is how you're going to be, because Gemini is connected to the nervous system and the mind. So if you have a sun in Gemini, your goal should be able to find yourself and create a really solid identity mentally for yourself, and to be able to also communicate who you are to people, right? You got to be able to put yourself on display and show yourself to people through some kind of mode of communication, right? Whether it be writing, whether it be journaling, or even just talking, right? Becoming a really good communicator. Someone asked, all Scorpio degrees or just that 20 degrees? All Scorpio degrees. All Scorpio degrees. So if anybody, when I see someone that has a sun at 8 degrees, a sun at 20 degrees, right? They're going to be going, they're like a Scorpio. They have Scorpio energy. They're going to be going through death and rebirth, right? So yeah. So that's the sun at 20 degrees, Gemini. The cool thing about his sun placement is that he has the sun in a great house. You know, he has a sun in the 5th house of performance, right? The 5th house is the house of fun. It's the house of joy. It's the house of self-expression. It's the house of performance. It's the house of talent and inherent gifts, you know? So him having a 5th house sun really caters to him being a good performer, a good actor. You know, he has ingrained talent. And it's funny because he got this from his father. He has the sun in the 5th house. The sun is the father, right? So having the sun in the 5th house is great. This also speaks to children, him being a dad and him having a lot of joy being a father. And I think that's one of the other interesting things that he says in his interview is he says that, you know, one of the best things in his life is being a father. His child has brought him joy, you know, his firstborn child especially. But this also says, sun, Chiron, Lilith here, we're going to talk about Chiron and Lilith, that, you know, that his child is not going to have a good experience of him as a father unless he gets it together and focuses on his child, right? When I see 5th house placement, especially when the sun and the moon here, people that have a 5th house sun or moon, when they become a parent or have a child, they tend to identify with their child and they focus hardcore on their child and on the role of what it means to be a parent. And being a parent for them is very important because the 5th house is the house of children, right? And so, but we can also see, even though he's got this 5th house sun and it's given him talent and he has a child and he enjoys being a father, there's also a very deep wound that he has around everything associated with the 5th house, around the sun as well. Because look what he has. He has Chiron, our deepest wound, right next to the sun. You see this? So this is similar to having Chiron in Leo. For those of you that have Chiron in Leo, having Chiron next to the sun is very similar. So Chiron is a wound, a deep karmic wound that we came into this life with. And it's this wound that's going to fester until we help others heal, or until we really go and work on this deep healing around this thing. And so not only does your Chiron tell you where you have wounding by the sign that it's in, right? Those of us, you know, the Chiron and Gemini generation, we have a deep wound around communication. We have a deep wound around our self-expression and around intelligence and intellect as well, right? Many people, or even a wound around siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, stuff like this. So that's the Chiron and Gemini generation, right? So it's interesting because Shia Labeouf during the interview, there's a lot of times where he kind of references himself as being stupid or being dumb, or he says that he's not intelligent. And I really do think that this speaks to the Chiron and Gemini that he has conjunct the sun. I think a deep wound of his is not seeing himself as smart or intelligent. And that's a very much a Chiron and Gemini wound, even especially when Chiron is next to the sun or Chiron is next to Mercury, right? So with Chiron conjunct the sun, where is his woundedness at? He has a deep wound around his father. He has a deep karmic wound around children, being a father. He has a deep karmic wound around self expression, around joy. He has a deep karmic wound around talent, okay? Around being like happy. He also has a deep karmic wound around identity. He doesn't know who he is. He's searching for himself. And he has a wounded man complex. This right here is the wounded ego complex, a wounded identity, right? And there's a moment in his interview where he literally says, whenever I think about myself, I'm unhappy. I posted this in my stories. Whenever I think about myself, I'm unhappy. All this self-reflection bullshit, it does nothing for me. All it does is make me depressed. It makes me sad. And we can see that because the sun conjunct Chiron. Okay. This man, whenever he thinks about himself, his relationship with his ego and his identity, it's a wounded one. It hurts. When you are seeing this man crying during the interview that he did recently, these are real, genuine tears of personal pain that he's feeling. I want you guys have to understand this. You guys have to see this. Okay. It's very important. Because what we're seeing is a man the wounded man putting himself on display. And that's the sun conjunct Chiron. This is really the wounded celebrity. This right here, this is the wounded celebrity. You know, sun conjunct Chiron in the 5th house in Gemini. But where does this wound also stem from? This stems from the father. And we can see that his father was not, is or was, when especially during his upbringing, not a safe or stable person. And he gravitates, you know, his father and him, what he inherited from his father is like extremes, being torn between different sides of the self and being very extreme and rebellious and chaotic in nature. And we can see this because Shia Labeouf's sun is being pulled by two particular planets. It is being pulled by two planets that are kind of giving him a way out and asking him to choose who are you going to be in this lifetime? What kind of convictions are you going to have? You know, are you going to be the wild, chaotic man? Are you going to be the spiritual Catholic man? Are you going to be the celebrity, the entertainer? Who you want to be, right? You want to, and it's interesting, like, because we see him fluctuate in real time in this interview that he did with Andrew, right? We see him fluctuate between these parts of himself, these different aspects of his personality, where he's like spiritual and emotional and sensitive and sad and very like, I'm sorry. And then he's like fun and wild and chaotic and like, you know, fuck it. You know, Mardi Gras was a great time. Like I had a good time, you know, I'll do it again, regardless of all the bullshit, right? He's like, I want to be around people, I want to have fun, I want to party, right? And then we also see the side of him that's kind of very intelligent and inquisitive and self-expressive. But there's also a deep wounded identity complex. And where is this in his chart? Where do we see this? Uranus opposite the sun. Exactly. Look at this. Uranus, the planet of chaos, the planet of rebellion, and it's Uranus and Sag. This is the warriors Uranus. This is the soldier's Uranus. This is the athlete, you know, this is like the Taibo artist, the kung fu fighter Uranus, right? Like this placement, Uranus and Sag, directly opposite his sun in Gemini. Okay. So this Uranus is pulling at him. He has this chaotic Uranus and Sag pulling at his sun in Gemini. So this opposition right here creates a lot of chaos around identity and personality when people have Uranus in a harsh aspect to the sun. The sun is trying to solidify itself. If you think about the sun being the center of the solar system, right? The sun doesn't move, it doesn't change. And many of us, right, when we have a strong sun, we have a sense of self or a sense of identity that's immovable and unchangeable. And it's actually great for the personality to have a sun that is very stable, you know, to have a sun that's not being aspected by like Saturn or Uranus or Pluto, right? It's you won't see a personality or an identity complex when people do not have negative aspects from planets that are unstable to the sun, especially Uranus. Uranus really creates this bipolar personality. Uranus makes someone frantic, erratic, electric, right? Like the beautiful thing about his Uranus Sun opposition is it makes him so magnetic. It makes him so interesting. He has this brimming electricity. You can feel this when you're watching Shia Labeouf, whether it be in his movies or whether it be in an interview. This man has this, he has this frantic, restless energy. Like he has a hard time sitting still. Like, yes, he has ADD, ADHD, something. He has this hyper intense energy, this frantic energy to him. I think it's the Aquarius rising, but I also think it's Uranus opposite his sun. Okay. Uranus opposite the sun, right, gives him an erratic, chaotic identity. It gives him an unstable identity. This also tells us that his relationship with his father was extremely unstable growing up. His father was coming in and out of his life. So whenever you see Uranus in a harsh aspect to the sun, Uranus conjunct the sun, Uranus square the sun, Uranus opposite the sun, like Shia Labeouf has, the father, which is the sun, is coming and going, is not safe, is very unstable and chaotic. The relationship with a dad come and goes. The sun and Uranus are also archetypally, they're at odds with each other. They don't like each other. So Uranus is kind of like he's the king of the Titans, right? And the sun is kind of like Zeus. You know what I mean? And if you go back to Greek mythology, right? Someone asked about his 12th house Mars. We'll get there. So stay tapped in. We'll get there when we get there. So Uranus, right, was the king of the Titans that wanted to overthrow Zeus, right? Where the sun is like the king of the gods. So when you have Uranus and the sun, who are archetypal enemies, when you have them opposite each other, this is going to create a personality complex. This is going to create an identity complex. This is going to create, the identity. All of a sudden, there's a part of the identity that is rebelling against the self. It's like he has this version of himself, but then he wants to be authentic. And so he's kind of in rebellion against who he is. It's very interesting because as soon as the identity tries to solidify, and as soon as his son is trying to be like, okay, this is who we are, Uranus is like, oh, fuck that. That's not who we are. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be nobody. I want to be a rebel to what it is to myself. It's like self-rebellion. It's like it creates this inner turmoil where the identity cannot solidify, where he can't decide on who he is. He ends up rebelling, right? Shia Labeouf rebels against who he's been. He continuously kind of self-destructs and self-destroys with his identity and his personality. It's a very frustrating thing. I'm sure he gets frustrated and overwhelmed, and he gets pissed off sometimes just at himself because he can't decide on what is authentic and what is real to him and what is performative. And I think it's interesting because there's a few times during the interview where, even in the beginning of the interview where he wants to press the reset button, like, let's go again, because he doesn't want to be performative. He doesn't want to be performative. Oh, I don't want to be performative. I want to be authentic. I don't want to be performative. I want to be authentic. But I don't even think he knows when he's performing or when he's being authentic. I don't think he has a clear boundary around this. I don't think he's really dove in deep within himself to kind of be able to dissect and be able to kind of, separate who he is, right? Character-wise, identity-wise, outside of Shia Labeouf, the ego, the celebrity. And I think he has a deep wound around what it means to be a celebrity, and a performer and an actor, right? For Shia Labeouf, in this chart, I don't think acting is good for him because I don't think with this complex identity stuff that he's got going on, Sun conjunct Chiron, Uranus opposite the sun, I don't think a profession that has him get confused around his identity is going to bring him answers or truth or is going to help him heal this. I think a profession where he has to play different characters and play different identities and be different people is going to fuck him up even more. And I think that's what it's done. I think a career of playing different people, playing different characters for someone who doesn't know themselves deeply and doesn't have a solid sense of self can actually be very detrimental or harmful to the ego and the identity. Especially if someone like Shia Labeouf, the way his chart is built, right, is on a journey of purifying and cleansing the identity and the ego, of getting to the truth and the depths of who someone is, right? Having a job where you have to go and play different characters and perform different people, I feel like it's only going to create confusion, especially having building your a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning in life around acting, right? So, and this is one of the things that he also says, like he's like, I don't want to do acting anymore, you know? He's like, or I want to do acting where I identify with the characters, or I have some kind of shared narrative, or have an emotional investment in it. That's one of the things that he said, you know, about stepping away from Hollywood and the projects that he's done in the last like 10, 15 years. It's like, it's mostly projects that are expression of him. And what's also so fascinating is that he did a movie on his dad. Do you guys know this? He did a movie called Honey Boy that's literally it's kind of like a sensationalized autobiographical story about his relationship with his father and about his father. And it's because, you know, Sheila Buff, this is where he needs to do healing. He needs to do a deep amount of healing around his relationship with his father and around how he identifies with his father. And I think he is being pulled between a lot of different identities, you know. I think I think that Sheila Buff wants to be a gangster. He wants to be a Catholic. He wants to be, you know, authentic. He wants to be a rebel. He wants to be an outcast. He wants to be a community. I think he needs to decide on who he's going to be. I think he needs to commit himself to being the highest, best version of those identities. He kind of needs to pick and choose. Okay. Someone said something about substance abuse. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah. Well, Aquarius risings, right? Aquarius risings really value their identity. And so someone says, right? But Aquarius rising has the sign of identity in the seventh house. So what you'll see with Aquarius rising is there's a lot of self-rejection and self-deprecation. This is an Aquarius thing. I don't like myself. I hate myself. I'm hard on myself. I judge myself, right? And it's because Aquarius rising has Leo in the seventh house. So this is the sign of identity, right? So the sign of identity is opposite of the rising sign. So it's interesting. I think, you know, this is why Aquarius is always looking for themselves in other people, because they have Leo in the seventh house, right? So Aquarius has Leo, the sign of identity, opposite of it, right? And we can see that this guy, he has an ego complex. He has an identity complex. I mean, it's there's multiple things in his chart that show us that. Okay. All right. So we talked about the Sun conjunct Chiron. We talked about the Sun opposite Uranus. This right here, Uranus opposite the Sun, creates a chaotic individual. Okay. Do you know who else has an opposition to their Sun from a Sag placement, but it's a different one? And this is why this is why him and Sheila Buff get mentioned so often. Kanye West has this. So Kanye West has a Gemini sun opposing Neptune in Sag. And that's also kind of like a distorted ego, a distorted self-perception. Like Kanye West doesn't see himself clearly. Like that man, his self-perception is like totally, it's like fantastical. He's delusional. He's cuckoo. He has Neptune opposite the Sun in Gemini, where Shia LaBeouf has Uranus opposite the Sun, right? So the other thing is the Sun is the planet of authority figures, and Uranus is the rebel. And so when someone has this as well, Uranus in aspect to the Sun, especially by an opposition or a square, This is gonna make them rebellious to authority figures. So, and this is a strong indicator of people that get in trouble with the cops, people that get in trouble with police, people that need to work for themselves, that have a hard time working with others because they have a hard time following rules, people that kind of show up late or show up whenever they want, people that don't listen to directors, that don't listen to other actors and don't listen to their father, rebel against the father, rebel against their mother. They're just in a constant state of rebellion. Don't fucking tell me what to do, right? Don't tell me what to do. This is the sun opposite Uranus. And this makes him very, like, he needs to know when it's okay to rebel and when it's not. This aspect really leads, and it's Aquarius rising thing too, a rebel without a cause. What are you rebelling against? At what point are you going to accept that you need to have an element of authority in your life? You need to have a respect for authority. You need to have structure, And this is a very Aquarius rising thing, and this is a very Uranus opposite the sun thing, Don't tell me what to do, right? And another thing, inherently for Aquarius rising, the relationship with the mother is typically the better one, where the relationship with the father and authority figures is very wounded. A lot of Aquarius risings, they experience betrayal or mistrust from authority figures, from the father. They experience a deep karmic wound, emotional wound from authority figures. They get manipulated, they get taken advantage of by authority figures. And the reason being is because Aquarius has Scorpio in the 10th house of the father, the 10th house of authority figures, the 10th house of public image, public reputation. So the fact that Aquarius rising has a Mars ruled 10th house, a Scorpio ruled 10th house of the father, tells us that a lot of Aquarius risings do have a deep wounded relationship with the father. There's power issues, power struggles. Dad is secret. Dad is secretive. Dad's manipulative. Dad has addictions. Scorpio in the 10th. Okay. And it's because of this, right? Aquarius rising has Scorpio in the 10th house, right? And the placement of Mars is going to tell us a lot, right? About Aquarius rising's dad, the placement of their Mars, because Mars rules the father in Aquarius rising chart, right? And look where he has Mars. Look at this in the 12th house in Capricorn. So look at Shia Labeouf, Aquarius rising, Scorpio in the 10th house, ruled by Mars, Mars in Capricorn in the 12th house. What was his dad? A prisoner, a criminal. 12th house is what? Prisons. 12th house rules prisoners. 12th house is about self-destructive energy, the house of self-undoing, the house of isolation, the house of hospitals, the house of sanctuaries, the house of hermitages, the house of church, the house of prisons. And it's interesting because Shia Labeouf, he kind of glorifies prison culture. It's really fascinating to hear him talk about prison and how he kind of like glorifies it and he kind of like romanticizes it. I don't know. It's weird. He has this like karmic thing with prison culture, and I think it has a lot to do with his father. His strong, he kind of wants to be a badass. Like he wants to be this like badass gangster, energy like his father. It's like, bro, stop it. You're Even Stevens from Shia LaBeouf. Please. He has to let this go, dude. I really do feel that Shia LaBeouf has this toxic masculinity thing that he inherited from the father, where he wants to be tough and he wants to be hard. And I think it's a past life thing. I'll be honest with you. I think he's been the 12th house Mars in Capricorn retrograde told me that he's been in the military in many lifetimes, that he's been in very strict, rigid, hierarchical social structures as a man. So like being a man in the military, and this is also why it's connected to his fashion. His military, so he has like a military fashion. Do you guys notice this? It's something that Kanye West stole from him, but he does like the tied up army boots and like the very rough clothing and like that army fashion, that's a past life thing. And we can see the army fashion in his chart because look he has Mars touching Venus. Look at 12th house Mars touching Venus in Cancer. So Venus is your fashion sense, right? If you have a planet touching your Venus, coming into your Venus like this, Mars opposite Venus, Mars is going to influence your fashion sense. You see? Yeah, and he even has like a cut on his face, and he just has like this rough and rugged look that he tends to wear, and that's because of the Mars opposite Venus. We're going to talk about this aspect because this aspect is why he also has issues with domestic violence and why he, has issues in relationships. But anyways, okay. So let's go back to his sun. I'm kind of bouncing around everywhere, but I want to really focus on his sun because his sun placement, there's so much complexity with it, and there's a lot going on with his sun. All right. So we already talked about Sun conjunct Uranus. We talked about Sun conjunct Chiron, the deep wound around the ego, around the father, around identity. We talked about the Sun opposite Uranus, which kind of creates a bipolar identity effect where he doesn't know who he is. He's rebelling against himself. He's rebellious without a cause. He's very, decentered. He's very erratic. He's electric and magnetic. Uranus opposite the Sun makes you electric and magnetic. It also kind of creates a chaotic identity. So then what else is aspecting his sun? He has Jupiter. Jupiter in Pisces. Squaring the sun. Look at this. 21 degrees. Sag degree. Jupiter square Uranus. Jupiter square the sun. So look at, he has Uranus pulling at his sun, but he also has Jupiter pulling at his sun. Okay. So what is Jupiter in Pisces about? It's about a lot of things. This is about faith. Jupiter is the planet of optimism, joy, abundance, luck, opportunity. Pisces is a sign of faith, spirituality, right? Surrender, cosmic consciousness, unconditional love. Pisces is the sign of Jesus, the Lamb, right? He paid for our sins, right? He martyred himself. He sacrificed himself. Jupiter and Pisces. Pisces is the sign of the martyr, right? It's a sign of the person that sacrifices himself for the greater good. Martyrdom is a Pisces thing, right? Pisces is the sign of saints. So we have his Jupiter and Pisces that's telling him, Shia, come over here. Be spiritual. Be religious. Be a man of God. Be faithful. But what is the second house Jupiter about? This is about overindulgence, overconsumption, right? Pisces is the sign of escapism, the sign of alcoholism, right? It has a lot to do with addiction. So this tells us Sun square Jupiter, his father was overindulging on substances when Shia Labeouf was created. This aspect of Sun square Jupiter between the 5th and the 2nd, this is the father, and this is dad's addictions. So what does this become? Sun square Jupiter, this becomes his alcoholism. Jupiter in the second house in Pisces, second house is your food, is your diet, is what you're putting in your body, right? Second house is your sense of values, right? It's also what's important to you, but it's your food, it's your diet, it's what you're putting in your body. It's also money and your relationship with money, right? And I think the fascinating thing about his Jupiter in the second, oh, look what Artie said. LOL, he has Jupiter and Pisces like me, and my dad was an alcoholic growing up. Exactly, because that's what this tells us. Sun square Jupiter between Pisces and Gemini is dad having, especially in the second house, this is about addiction and escapism, right? This is about overindulgence, right? But what this does, though, it's so fascinating because the Sun square Jupiter, it gives someone a larger than life personality. It expands the ego. It makes someone overtly confident. Like, I believe in myself. I can do anything. It gives them unconditional, unyielding faith in themselves in a weird way. But it could also be delusional. There can be a distorted perception of the self, right? The Jupiter is a planet that expands and grows things. Jupiter is a planet that, right, it enlarges. So when you have Jupiter in a square to the sun, the square aspect can bring out the more negative aspects of Jupiter, where Jupiter is inflating the ego. Jupiter is inflating, right, the woundedness of the identity complex. You see, Jupiter is the planet of faith and belief. It's a planet of morals and ethics. But what happens when you have Jupiter square Uranus and Jupiter square the sun? You can come up with your own sense of morality. You can come up with your own sense of self-righteousness. You know those people that you run into and they're so rigid around their morals and they judge you very harshly? Like, oh, you're gay. You're not going to go to heaven. You're not going to go to heaven, Oh, you're this. You did this. You're not, like, where there's like extreme judgment and extreme prejudice that seems to be coming from a place of self. Like, that's Sun square Jupiter. That's Sun square Jupiter. And when people have the Sun square Jupiter, their ego can infringe upon their beliefs and their morals and their ethics. And these are people that become self-righteous preachers. But there can also be hypocrisy, right? There can be a little bit of a moral disconnect where a person is moral and ethical, but they don't hold themselves to the same moral standards of their beliefs. So they exist in a space of kind of moral hypocrisy and also moral inconsistency, right? They're always moving the goalpost of what is right and what is wrong to accommodate themselves, to give themselves permission to always be the good guy in their narrative or in their story. And this is how you get people that are delusional around faith, around right and wrong, around morals and ethics. It's how you end up with pastors that are going home and sinning, right? Jupiter square the sun, also Jupiter square Uranus. So he has what we call a T square between the sun, Jupiter, and Uranus. When someone has a T square with their sun involved, we have Jupiter pulling at the sun, and we also have Uranus pulling at the sun. But we also have Jupiter and Uranus pulling at each other. You see this? So this is a guy that has a very complex ego, very complex identity, a very complex relationship with himself. He doesn't see himself clearly. He has a distorted self-perception. He has distorted morals and beliefs and ethics. He has distorted spiritual practice. It's not focused, it's not grounded, it's not centered, right? And I think the other fascinating thing is what he says about, there's a moment in the interview where he's talking about the rigidity of program, in program meaning AA, and how he goes in and out of AA and all the time. And what he says is he doesn't like program because it has too much structure. It has too much rigidity. And that structure and that rigidity, he feels, deprives him of joy and being able to have fun and being able to be connected to the joy and the fun and the wild innocence of life. And you could see this in his chart because he has Jupiter in Pisces squaring Uranus and Sag. He has the sun in Gemini squaring Uranus and Sag. He kind of wants to be this wild man. This Uranus and Sag, it keeps creating issues and problems for him because he wants to be this man of God, this man of faith, but he needs to choose and commit to living a life that is disciplined and grounded and stable. But the Uranus and Sag pulls at him, And not only that, he's in Aquarius rising and he's ruled by Saturn in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is a sign that wants what? What do Sag and Aquarius have in common? What do these two signs, him being Aquarius rising, the ruler of his rising being Saturn in Sagittarius, right? Uranus and Sag pulling at his. What do these signs have in common? Aquarius and Sag. They want freedom. They want autonomy. They want to be independent unto themselves. They do not want responsibility. They don't want to be trapped. They don't want to be stuck. They don't want to be bound to anybody or anything. So we can see that he has Mars in Capricorn. He has Saturn touching his moon. He's an Aquarius rising ruled by Saturn. But then he has Uranus in Sag touching his Jupiter, touching his sun. He has Saturn in Sagittarius. Saturn, the planet of discipline, in Sagittarius, a sign that's very wild. So we can see there's this push and pull happening identity-wise with this man where he's gravitating between abstinence, discipline, living a spiritual monk life, doing the right thing, learning how to commit, learning how to show up and be consistent, learning how to be a stable person, a stable father, a stable husband, a stable man for people around him, but then wanting to be chaotic, wanting to be rebellious, wanting to go out and party, wanting to go out and have fun. Yes, you can do that, right? Shia, go out there, party, have fun. Go do your, you want to go to Mardi Gras and do that for 2 weeks. Go do that and have it be a spiritual experience. But, buddy, you got to contain your fucking chaos. You got to contain your chaos. You need a healthy outlet for this wild man energy. You know what I think this guy needs? I think your chaos. You need a healthy outlet for this wild man energy. You know what I think this guy needs? I think this guy needs boxing. I think he needs kickboxing. I think he needs, like some kind of raw form of like fighting and exercise, because he needs to get all this excessive electric Uranus and Sag, Mars and Capricorn energy. He needs to get this out and he needs to channel it into something constructive. Going out there during Mardi Gras, getting drunk to the point where you lose your consciousness and then fighting with people, what are you doing? How is that spiritual? How are you being divinely led or divinely guided? How can you go over here and come on an interview and say that getting in a fight with someone over some bullshit that you weren't even conscious of or aware of, you weren't even there, you know that you weren't even there because he doesn't remember it. I guarantee you right now, he was blacked out drunk and he doesn't remember what happened at Mardi Gras when he got into that fight. He was totally blacked out. So he comes to consciousness, and the next day he's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to take accountability. But are you really? Are you really? Yeah, I fucked up. Yeah, I messed up. Yeah, I fucked up. I'm going to, I got that. I'm going to take. But no, accountability is, and he even says it, is not doing the thing again, not making the same mistake again. Why? What are you fighting for? And I think it's because I think this whole thing around fighting and his anger and his rage, I think it's really rooted in the relationship with the father, but I also think it's rooted in a lot of frustration and a lot of pain around not being supported or loved or not being recognized or not being celebrated by the mother and his father and by his family. And also feeling like it's like this deep feeling of like he's angry about, it's like everyone's using me. It's like I'm only useful to my family because I give them things, because I give them money, right? But they don't really value me, appreciate me, or see me. And I think that's also a Sun conjunct Chiron thing. I think the way his chart is built with the Sun conjunct Chiron, I think he was looking to be celebrated or supported or seen by his parents, especially by his father, and he never got that. And I think that's what he's mad about. I think that's what he's angry about deep down inside. I think that's what hurts, is the fact that, he feels very taken advantage of. And he even says it, yeah, transactional. He even says that. He's like, all my relationships have felt transactional. There is multiple interviews where he says this. He says, I feel like most of my life and most of my relationships have just been about transaction, and stuff like this. Yeah. So let's go back to what we're talking about. Someone asked, when someone believes a little bit of every religion, that's called omonism. And I identify as that. I'm an ominist because I believe in a little bit of Jesus. I believe in a little bit of Hinduism. I believe in a little bit of, Buddhism. My beliefs are all encompassing. I believe in everything. That's me. But it's funny. I have a Jupiter square as well. So I have Jupiter trine Saturn and I have Jupiter square the moon. So I can relate to some aspects of Shia Labeouf around faith and belief, around being a man of God. I'm a very faithful religious person. Not religious, but I'm a faithful person. And it's the Jupiter aspect, right? I told myself that I would not talk about my chart today. And I ended up doing it. I was doing so good. But I have a second house Jupiter as well. So I get it. I understand this guy a lot, The beautiful thing, what is the beautiful thing about his second house Jupiter though? Luck when it comes to money and finance, You know what's so fascinating? Do you know how he got put on And he even says it. He's like, I won the lotto when it came to even Stevens. So there was a man, check this out. There was a man, I think the man's name was Steve, that while his dad was in jail, so while Shia Labeouf's dad was in jail, there was a program, it was called like the Big Brother program or something, where to kind of substitute for the father, the jail would provide like a mentor to boys or children that had parents that were in prison or a father that was in prison. So there was this guy, I think his name was Steve or something, right? That would like hang out with them like a dad, And this guy was like a stranger, but this guy that would hang out with them as part of this program was a stuntman in Hollywood. So actually, Shia LaBeouf, it was through this random stranger, through this guy that he met through this prison program, that he ended up having his first opportunity in Hollywood. He actually put him on. So he started, so he like opened up the door for Shia LaBeouf when it came to Hollywood. And what's so fascinating about this is we could see this in his chart, because in the 11th house of strangers and opportunity, what does he have? He has Uranus and Saturn and Sagittarius. And what is Uranus or Saturn and Sag? This is about a stunt man. Sagittarius, stunt man, someone that's very physical, someone that's very active. Uranus and Sag is literally a stunt man signature. He has Uranus and Sag opposite the sun. Uranus and Sag square Jupiter, sun square Jupiter. It was a stunt man, right, that he met through something associated with his father that ended up giving him a career opportunity that made him a lot of money. Jupiter in the second house. You see this? So this kind of signature between Jupiter in the second squaring the sun, Jupiter in the second squaring 11th house Uranus, 11th house being the house of goals and dreams and like opportunity, but also the house of strangers and like random things. It's so fascinating how this aspect also manifested as him being put on by a random stranger who was a stuntman. You see? And then him becoming rich or wealthy around the age of 11 or 12. So he started even Stevens around the age of I think it was like 11 or like 10 or 11. And that's around his Jupiter return. So we go through our first Jupiter return in Pisces, or our first Jupiter return around the age of 12. And so that's when his family started making money. He was like, we never been wealthy or rich. So I don't know if you guys know this about Shia LaBeouf, but this man, you can see this in his chart. He grew up broke. His mom was hustling and working all day. Look at this. He has Mercury, Venus, and Cancer in the 6th house. So whenever we see these 6th house, 12th house placements like this is about struggle. This is about hardship. This is about parents. When you have Mercury, Venus in the 6th like this, or 6th house placements, this is about parents who are every day, they're working, they're struggling, they're hustling, they have multiple jobs. This is like not a chart that indicates growing up with wealth. This is a chart that shows us you work hard, you get wealthy. And that's exactly what happened, right? At a very young age, he started working. And I want you guys to understand, we see even Stevens, we see the product of his child labor, right? But you got to understand something. And Shia LaBeouf says it in his interview. I've been hustling and working since I was like 8 or 9. Like, this is a job for me. And he says these are push-ups. I've been doing push-ups since I was a child. I've been working since I was a child. I want you guys to understand this, because we're over here thinking, he's on a show and even Stevens. No, but you got to understand, he's going to work every day as a child. He does not have a regular childhood. This is a chart that shows us he's getting pulled into working every day, and then his family's depending on him financially. Jupiter in the 2nd house. Look at this. Jupiter trine Venus. Venus rules his 4th house of the mother. We can also see that he really loved his mom, though. I do think that he had a codependent relationship with his mom. We're going to talk about the moon. We're going to talk about these Cancer placements in the moon as well, because, his mom did play a very pivotal, part of his life. He got a lot of his talent, a lot of his character, but a lot of his sensitivity from his mother. And we could see that he really loved his mom. And he got kind of luck and joy from his mom, because look, he has Jupiter trining Venus. You see? So whenever you see Cancer placements, the relationship with the mother is going to be very important. Okay. Whenever you see Cancer placements, the relationship with the mother, no matter if it's a man or a woman. But for a man, it's even, I feel like it's a little bit more important because the Cancer placements make them very, very sensitive, very soft, and make them kind of erratic emotionally, Um, people don't think about Cancer placements like this, but Cancer placements, you know, their emotions are rapidly shifting and changing, and sometimes that can look like mental health issues or bipolar issues. So a common thing for cancer placements, especially um, when the moon is there, is one of the things I've noticed as being an astrologer is bipolar, mental health issues, okay, depression. There's a lot of mental health issues that come from Cancer placements because it's the lunacy of the moon, right? So he has this Mercury, Venus, and Cancer, but look at, he has Venus trine Jupiter, and this is so blessed. Oh, this is so, having Venus in aspect to Jupiter between the second house and the sixth house. This is so blessed for money and work. This is such a blessed trine and a best and really good placements, right? For money and for success and for career. So what he says is by the time he was he was like 11 or 12, he was making $8,000 a week. And the whole family, all of a sudden, he was like, "Oh yeah, we could all have a house now." My parents quit their jobs, so all of a sudden, around the age of 11 or 12, even Stevens happens. He gets put on, and he's the breadwinner for his family. All of a sudden, his mom and his dad are relying on him financially. So, what does this tell us? Sixth house, the house of employees, the house of servitude, right? He kind of becomes a servant. He kind of becomes an employee to his mother and his father. And I want you guys to understand this because we're over here thinking, oh, you're on Even Stevens and that's so fun and that's so no, you're showing up to work every day. That's how he experiences this. As a child, he's like, oh no, I started working when I was 10 or 11. Like, and I grew up very, very fast. This is one of the things like I also want you to understand. Aquarius rising, Saturn people, they grow up quickly. They get shown the real world very fast. Okay. Aquarius rising, Capricorn rising, Saturn people, these are people that they start working very young or responsibility gets put on them very, very young. Okay. It's like they don't have an easy upbringing. Okay. So these are rough rising signs to have. A Saturn real rising sign is a little rough. Okay. Because there's a lot of things where Saturn's gonna kind of mature you and show you things very quickly. You don't really get a childhood. You don't get the innocence and you don't get the innocence of a youthful childhood where there's not a lot of you grow up very, very fast. You're shown things or you experience things that are very difficult, very hard, very, very young. And Shia Labeouf talks about this. He's like, my dad was in prison. My dad was going to rehab when I was like 11, 12 years old. Like, this was my upbringing. This is what I went through. You know what I mean? Even younger, I think when he was like 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, the formative years, right? So yeah, so it's something to understand because we what we see with these celebrities is we see their surface level success, we see their fame and their popularity, but what we're not seeing is the fact that they're like a child worker. Like they're like a child employee, like they are working at a very young age. And so they're growing up and maturing at a very young age. You see what I'm saying? Aquarius, Capricorn rising, yeah, working at by the age of 15, 16, working for the family business, stuff like this, right? That's that sixth house Venus and Mercury, right? So yeah, okay, let's kind of ground it a little bit. What have we talked about so far? We've talked about the sun conjunct Chiron, the sun opposite Uranus, the sun square Jupiter, this T square that he has with Uranus, Jupiter, and the sun. Okay, this is what we've been focusing on. And we've been talking about this because this kind of has created an identity complex with him. Jupiter in Pisces is about him being spiritual, him being faithful. It's about alcoholism and sobriety. It's about having a little bit of a delusional self-perception around faith or having being kind of self-righteous, Sun square Jupiter. Okay. Also a woundedness around faith in some way, because he does have a Chiron Jupiter square. Uranus square Jupiter, kind of chaotic faith, unstable morals, unstable ethics. He can be a little hypocritical sometimes. He has really strong morals and ethics, but he doesn't adhere to them or he rebels against them sometimes. Uranus square Jupiter. Sun square Uranus, having an unstable personality, being bipolar, not really knowing who he is. Sun Chiron conjunct opposite Uranus, rebelling against himself, trying to be authentic, right? Trying to not be performative, but then also kind of destroying his own character, his own personality, and right as a part of it. So this is a very complex sun placement. His sun is afflicted, is what I would say. This is not a peaceful, this is not a guy where he sits and, he thinks about himself and he his concept of self, his perception of self, his ego's identity. There's a deep woundedness here. There's a deep woundedness around who he thinks he is, right? Shia Labeouf, his deepest wound is his ego. It's his personality, it's his identity. Sun conjunct Chiron, Sun opposite Uranus, Sun square Jupiter, okay? All right. So now let's talk about his moon. Because the moon, there's something, and we're going to talk about the Cancer placements, and we're going to talk about the Venus opposite Mars. So look at, he has Venus in Cancer, opposite Mars in Capricorn. He has a Leo moon. He has Mercury in Cancer, opposite Neptune in Capricorn. But he has a Leo moon square Pluto. And he has Leo moon trine Saturn. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. And these, it's one thing to have Pluto aspecting your moon. It's another thing to have Saturn aspecting your moon, but to have both of them aspecting your moon, especially Pluto square the moon, we don't want to see it, It's tough. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This is not, those aspects to his moon is why this man is so depressive, is why this man is so jealous. He's so toxic in relationships. He gets really possessive with women. He gets controlling, domineering with women as well. We're going to talk about his Venus and his moon because both his Venus and his moon are afflicted. So if we want to know about how someone shows up in relationship, we want to know, we're looking at a man's chart. We want to know how he's going to treat a woman. We kind of want to know what's going to happen with women or how he shows up in relationships with others. In general, it doesn't have to be women, in just relationships, okay? We're going to look to the moon. We're going to look to Venus. And we're going to look to what's going on with them. Where are they at by house, by sign, and what is aspecting them? Because when there is negative planets, or more of the harsh, difficult planets aspecting the moon or Venus, those planets are going to manifest in this person's relationship, love life, and problems are going to arise. There's going to be some problems and issues around relationships and partnerships. Okay. So let's talk about the moon first. So he has a Leo moon in the 7th house, right? And this is pretty much like having a Libra moon. So whenever, not pretty much, but it's similar because the 7th house is like a Libra house. It's the house of partnership and relationship. It's the house of others, right? The issue with having a Leo moon here, though, is Leo is very much about the self. The moon in Leo is very needy. It needs a lot of attention. If you have a child that has a Leo moon or the moon in the 5th house, this child needs to be celebrated. This child needs to be seen and supported. This child needs a lot of attention because they crave it emotionally. This may not be something that you see on the surface. The child may not be very expressive about this emotional need for attention, especially when they're younger, because we're in development, right? But what happens when a Leo moon person, especially when they're younger, is not getting the attention that they need, they act out to get that attention. So this becomes dramatic outbursts, temper tantrums, getting in trouble with the cops, getting in trouble with authority figures, because Leo is also connected to authority figures. It's a sign of the father, right? So when a Leo moon, especially because Leo is a sign of the father, when a Leo moon is not getting attention from the father, they're going to act out. They're going to misbehave Because what are they trying to do? They're saying, I need attention. I need to be seen. Celebrate me. Spend time with me. Go play with me. Have fun with me. Leo moon is a very fun, expressive placement for the moon. This combination of Leo and Gemini, Sun and Gemini, Moon. This is why he's so expressive and he's so funny and he's so charismatic. You know, we can't take our eyes off of Shia Labeouf when we're watching him because he has this like self-expression that's very genuine, but there's also this warmth and this affection to him. Like he's very affectionate, he's very warm, you know, and he's funny. The man's hilarious. The man's fucking hilarious. He's funny. He has a Leo moon and a Gemini sun, right? And he's mischievous. It's funny. He also is mischievous. There's a little bit of a mischief to him. And you're always going to see this mischievous energy with Gemini and Sag, especially when people have a combination of these two signs. You know, when there's an opposition between Gemini and Sag, you're going to see this mischief. You're going to see this kind of like devil's advocate energy, kind of like, you know, like it's like, I know I'm the problem, but it's funny at the same time. Like you see this mischievousness, right? And who else has this? Who else has a Gemini Sag opposition between the sun and the moon? Well, between the sun and the moon, Donald Trump, sun in Gemini, sun conjunct Uranus in Gemini, opposite the moon in Sagittarius. Okay, Kanye West, sun in Gemini, opposite Neptune in Sag. Here we are with Shia LaBeouf, sun in Gemini, opposite Uranus in Sag. You get this playfulness, you get this feistiness, you get this kind of. It's funny, it's innocent though. It comes off as innocent, but it can also be very, it's a little, it can be a little problematic, you know, the Leo moon and the Gemini sun, right? But where do we get this kind of like, the moon is how we relate emotionally to others, right? Especially because he has a Leo moon in the 7th. This really speaks to how he relates to others emotionally or how he relates to women in relationships, right? His Leo moon in the 7th house tells us that when he's in relationship, it's all about him and his emotional needs. He wants a woman or a partner to focus on him in his relationship. So when he's in relationship, because he has a 7th house Leo moon, he's very needy. And he can end up throwing tantrums and become that kind of chaotic child that he was when he wasn't getting attention from his mother or his father growing up. So I want you to understand this because relationships for him can be very triggering if he hasn't worked through this woundedness that he has around the moon. And where is the woundedness at also, right? Where's the woundedness at in relationship with him? The moon square Pluto. Moon square Pluto. This, when you see Pluto in Scorpio, when you see Pluto touching someone's moon or even someone's Venus, especially with a square opposition or conjunction, we get the obsession of Pluto. We get the addiction of Pluto. We get the Romeo and Juliet stories of Pluto. We get the jealousy of Pluto. We get the possessiveness of Pluto. We get the you belong to me and no one else can have you. That's Pluto square the moon. But it's Pluto in Scorpio square the moon in Leo. I'm going to tell you right now, and he even says it. This is what happened when he was with Twigs. This man got super jealous, super possessive, super toxic, okay, super abusive, controlling, okay, and because Pluto square the moon, right? When a man or woman has this, okay, this brings out really toxic emotional patterning in relationships. Pluto is a planet of obsession. Pluto is the planet of addiction. Pluto is a planet of emotional manipulation. Pluto is a planet of control. One of them. Saturn and Pluto have this in common. They both love control. But Pluto, the way he gets control when he's touching the moon, the way he gets control emotionally in relationships is by gaslighting, is by guilting people, shaming people, threatening suicide even. Oh, you don't love me, I'm gonna kill myself. I'm gonna make you love me until, right? Like this kind of like, oh, Moon and Leo, overly dramatic. Oh, dramatic, overly dramatic, toxic displays of emotion to get affection, to get attention, to get love. Moon square Pluto. Same idea. Yeah. If it's conjunct. Yeah. Moon conjunct Pluto, moon opposite Pluto, moon in Scorpio. Same energy. This is all the same energy. These aspects, those placements that I just mentioned, the aspects, they're going to manifest very similarly, right? The square, I think the square and the opposition are the hardest though. You know, this can, because you know what this can manifest as well as? This can manifest Moon in Leo. Leo's a sign of the father, but the moon is the mother. This can manifest as jealousy from one's parent. Having a mother or a father that's jealous of you, that's jealous of your career, that's jealous of your success, stuff like this as well. What happens? What kind of emotional complex or identity complex can you develop if you're growing up with parents that don't celebrate you because they're jealous of you? But then they're living off of your success at the same time. They're encouraging it from a place of work because they're benefiting off of your success, but they don't really celebrate you. And they're a little jealous or envious of your success. Do you see how this can fuck somebody up? You see how psychologically or emotionally this can fuck someone up and make them very angry and make them very rageful? Moon square Pluto. It's a very common thing. When I see moon square Pluto in a woman's chart, the mother, her relationship with her mom, very toxic. And the mom is usually jealous of her and envious of her. Or even jealous and envious of the relationship with the father sometimes. When the moon is squaring Pluto like this can be about dad being jealous that mom has a stronger relationship with son. So dad could have been jealous that mom and his son, Shia, had a very close, intimate relationship. So dad would sabotage it and kind of bring the attention back to him by doing something dramatic, right? But this could also manifest as mom being jealous of his career, right? Or mom being jealous of his relationship with his dad, his close relationship with his dad, right? So it's very complex. When I see moon square Pluto and I'm doing a reading for someone, if I was doing a reading for Shia, I'm gonna ask him questions. I'm gonna profile. I'm gonna talk about this, because we want to fully understand, how is this showing up in your life? How has this shown up? How is this going to continue to show up in your life? Right? Because this is going to show up as really toxic, obsessive relationship patterns. Him abusing power in relationships, him manipulating and gaslighting in relationships. And that's exactly what Twiggs experienced. He was lying to her. He was manipulating her. He was being controlling and possessive. He was being jealous, right? In doing crazy things, getting all angry and throwing tantrums and shit like that out of jealousy, jealous rage. Moon square Pluto, right, as a piece of that. But the other thing where we get kind of like control, subjugation of women, control of women. This is so crazy. This is a download I got when I looked at his chart. The raping and pillaging of women from a past life. So the download that I got with him when I looked at his chart, when I looked at the 12th house Mars, was that he was like a Roman crusader or something like this, where he was like a warrior or soldier that went into towns and like raped and pillaged. So he has a little bit of this past life residue around relationships with women, where he becomes very controlling. And he treats them like a piece of meat. He treats them like an object. And he kind of sees women from a perspective of, I need to conquer them. I need to win over them. I need to subjugate them. I need to have power or control over them. Okay. And we can see this in his chart with three primary aspects. Okay. The first is Pluto square the moon between the 10th house and the 7th house. 10th house is the house of power and authority. So when I see a man that has Pluto in the 10th squaring a 7th house moon, this tells me that he wants to have power and control over a woman, especially over her emotions. Okay. He wants something that's very emotionally intense. He wants something that's emotionally dramatic. He craves emotional intensity and emotional depth in relationship. He wants to merge. He wants to get close to a partner, but then his trust issues then his own lack of emotional stability and his own emotional chaos creates conflict in the relationship. That's moon square Pluto. Okay. The other thing is Saturn touching the moon. This tells me he wants control. This is an aspect of depression. When someone has Saturn touching the moon is about emotional peace, feeling good in our inner world. When you're all alone by yourself, how you feel about yourself, that's your moon and what's happening to your moon. When I see Saturn touching his moon, this tells me he gets depressed. He gets sad. But what does this also tell me? He likes to control women. Saturn, the planet of control, the moon in the seventh house. Relationships, when he's in a relationship with a woman, he feels like he needs an element of control over her. Saturn touching the moon, right? This is also about him needing to control his emotions or regulate his emotions. The reason why he has Saturn trying the moon, this also is his mom. I think his dad and his mom are rough on him. So that's the other thing. I think this Mars opposite Venus and the Saturn touching the moon, I also think there was an element of like, there needed to be more rules or more structure in his childhood, but he may not have gotten it. There may have been an element, because it's Saturn in Sagittarius, which I think is about inconsistent parenting, especially when I see it touching the moon. I think Saturn in Sag is like inconsistent morals and ethics growing up, and also like, this rule may be here one day, but tomorrow the rule's out the window, or even like there's hypocrisy with rules in the upbringing or within the family, right? It's like, oh, your parents are telling you, oh, don't do this, don't do that. But then you see them doing that same exact thing. So you're like, oh, fuck it. I'm going to do whatever I want. It's like that type of energy. Saturn trying the moon. In Sag and Leo, right? Like it's the moon in Leo trying Saturn in Sag. If this was like Saturn in Capricorn trying the moon in Virgo, this would be a very different conversation, right? Let's say he had a moon in Virgo trying to Saturn in Capricorn. Oh, no, this is growing up with parents that are very strict, very rule oriented, very structured, right? Where it's like, you come home, you do your homework, you go to bed by 9. Like there's a lot of rigidity. But when the moon's in Leo, trying Saturn and Sag, this is more fun. This is more chaotic. This is not a rigid household, right? And it's even funny because one of the things he says is he kind of grew up in a circus. Like his mother and his father were very inside and outside, He was kind of like a latchkey kid. Like he had a lot of time to be out in the streets, There wasn't a lot of structure. There wasn't a lot of rules. There wasn't a lot of oversight for him, right? But that is not good. We may think, oh, that may be good. That may be good for some kids, but that wasn't good for him because he needed structure, right? Like his mom should have taught him some discipline, how to be self-controlled, how to say no to himself. He has Saturn trying the moon, right? But this also could have been that his mom was just kind of mean or kind of angry, or him and his mom would get into fights and arguments, which is also something that he mentioned. Because he has Venus and Cancer opposite Mars and Capricorn, right? So Cancer is a sign of the mother. So when I see Venus and Cancer opposite Mars and Capricorn, this is about fighting with mom, battles for power when it comes to the mother. But where did he get this from? Mars opposite Venus, moon square Pluto, moon. He got this from the trauma of his mother and his father's relationship. You got to understand this, right? Moon square Pluto between Leo and Scorpio tells us that mom was always being betrayed by the father. This is father, right? 10th house of the father. So mom was always getting her feelings hurt by dad. This Mars-Venus opposition between Venus and Cancer, Mars and Capricorn, these are the rulers of his mother and you got to understand, this Venus rules his mother. Venus rules his 4th house of the mother. Mars rules his 10th house of the father, right? Scorpio is ruled by Mars. Taurus is ruled by Venus. And they're in opposition. Not only in opposition, but in houses that are tough. The 6th house and the 12th house, right? So this is like mom always visiting dad in prison. Mom working while dad's in jail. Venus, 4th house ruler in the 6th house. Mom's working. 6th house is jobs, work. 10th house ruler in the 12th house. Dad's in jail. And they're at odds with each other. Mars opposite Venus. Mom and dad are always arguing, always fighting, always in disagreement, always battling for power, always hurting each other. Venus opposite Mars. The 4th house ruler and the 10th house ruler at odds with each other. Okay? This is also, I'm going to tell you right now, my loves, I've seen this multiple times. Okay. This is a strong indicator of domestic abuse and domestic violence in relationships, whether a woman has it or a man has it. And if it's in a man's chart, Venus opposite Mars like this, the man is more than likely going to be the abuser. If it's in a woman's chart, the woman is more than likely going to be the victim. It really depends though, because sometimes in a woman's chart, she's Mars. She's the abusive one, right? And the partner is the victim, you know? Like I'd imagine for Aries rising women, a lot of times it's their partner that's a victim for Aries rising women, right? Because they have Venus in the seventh, right? Where they're Mars in their own chart, right? So for him, he identifies with Saturn. He really identifies with his 12th house Mars. You know, he's a Saturn guy. Look at Aquarius rising, ruled by Saturn and Sag. You know, he's a Mercury guy as well. He's a Gemini, and he's a Sun guy as well, right? Leo moon. He's a moon guy, Sun guy, Mercury guy, but he's a Saturn guy. Really strong Mars and Capricorn, right? Aquarius rising, ruled by Saturn. Saturn at a Leo degree, right? So, but this right here, my loves, Venus opposite Mars, this is about karma that he has with love. And this is about being an abusive, toxic partner. And the down that I got as well was like, you know, taking advantage of women in past lives or kind of like being mean or abusive towards women. This is like a karmic thing for him. And this is something that he needs to work through, you know. The 12th house, Mars in Capricorn, opposite Venus in Cancer. Like he needs to learn. This is why he has a 7th house moon, you know. He came into this life with a 7th house moon to learn how to be a better partner, a good partner, right? So yeah, like I think this guy, he's here to learn how to love, not love and not experience love as a method of like control or subjugation, right? Love is not about control. Love is not about possessiveness or ownership. Love is not about drama, you know? But we can see that like the aspects that he has with the moon and Venus being afflicted by Saturn, Pluto touching the moon, 12th house Mars opposite Venus, like, you know, he's got an afflicted moon and Venus. So it's like, I think he needs to learn how to be disciplined and self-controlled, right? Otherwise he becomes a very toxic, abusive person. So the other thing, okay, I want to pivot a little bit. I want to talk about addiction. And I want to talk about it from the perspective of his 12th house Mars, because I think the 12th house Mars in his chart is the biggest problem or one of the biggest issues. We can see that it is an aspect to his Venus and it's also an aspect to his Jupiter. So the 12th house is the house of self-undoing, right? It's the house of self-destruction, okay? It's the house, it's connected to prison life, hospitals, sanctuaries, but it's also the house of spiritual enlightenment. And whenever we have placements here, there's something about that planet or those placements that we have to karmically free ourselves from or liberate ourselves from so that we can like go to God or go to spirit or so that we can accomplish something, you know, in this life cycle, like in this incarnation. There's something very deeply profound about planets in the 12th house that we're here to clear up karmic wise, right? But the 12th house is also where we have past life residue. So it's like placements there are indications of things from the past life that we're here to clear up in this lifetime. So when I see Mars in the 12th house, that's a few things. That tells me that he has to clear out past life stuff around anger and rage, around fighting and arguments. He has to also clear out past life stuff around the way he shows up in relationships, because mainly because this 6th house Venus is being pulled into the 12th house because it's an aspect to Mars. Okay. He also has Neptune here and he has Jupiter touching Mars. So there's stuff around religion and faith that he also has to clear up. And we can also see this because he has a south node in the 9th house. That 9th house is the house of religion and faith. It's the house of God, right? It's the house of devotion. It's different though, because even though the 9th and the 12th are both connected to faith, they're doing it in different ways, right? The 12th house is about spirituality, but it's spiritual. It's about like surrender. You know, I see the 12th house as more of like the house, it's like a Buddhism energy. It's like surrender, suffering, letting go, isolation, the guru, like, separating yourself from society, being ostracized from society, being in a hospital, being in a prison, to kind of get to who you are, to kind of spiritually evolve, right? Where the ninth house, this is the house of religion. This is the house of the church. This is the house of, the Pope and the priest and the prophet. Like the ninth house is more, church steeple, right? It's more that energy, right? But look at, he has the south node of past life things in the ninth house, and he has Neptune and Mars in the 12th house, right? The south node is also in Libra, which is ruled by Venus, which brings us back to his Venus in Cancer, which brings us back to his Mars in Capricorn. So there's something here around relationships with women, in religion and faith, around and like relationships in general, South Node and Libra, right? There's relationships in general, relationships with women, religion, spirituality, faith. These are things that he's here to clear up and figure out from a past life. The way he's shown up in those things, the way he's related to those things. Capricorn is a sign of control. In Capricorn, it's so funny because I see Capricorn show up very strongly in people that are Catholic or people that follow religions where there's a lot of restriction, a lot of control. So whether it be like Islam, whether it be very intense forms of Christianity, Catholicism, like religions where there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of obedience and you got to follow the rules, right? Like that's a Capricorn thing. And so it's fascinating that he has Mars and Capricorn in the 12th house, because I do think that this connection to Catholicism is a past life thing. But I also think, it's an attempt, this whole thing around Catholicism, that this journey, a spiritual journey around Catholicism has been going on. It's an attempt to kind of purify the self and purify the soul and purify the spirit. And he talks about this, in his interview. He literally mentions multiple times that he's on a spiritual journey, and that God loves him. And, he has this moment where where Andrew asks him, "Oh yeah, what would you do if you met Jesus? And what would you say?" And he's like, "I would say nothing. I would just, and he breaks down in tears, and he said that he would, kiss his feet, and, and that moment is so real. Yeah, self-flagellation. Yeah, self-flagellation for sure. That's a 12th house Mars thing. Self-harm is a 12th house Mars thing, So many people that I've seen, clients that I've had, the 12th house Mars, I've gotten downloads right away where I've seen them cutting themselves or hurting themselves. It's also a suicide signature. So, in the interview, he talks about being in a really dark place when he was going through that thing with Twigs, and he was going through his divorce, and then he was in a really dark place and he contemplated suicide. That's a 12th house Mars thing as well. It's the house of self-undoing. Mars is the planet of violence, guns, weapons, war, anger, rage. Right? So when I see Mars in the 12th house, this is someone who will shoot themselves. This is someone who will cut themselves. This is someone who, in a moment of anger or rage, will make a sudden choice or decision to jump off a building or something. That's a 12th house Mars thing, But there's a deep pain. There's a deep anger, right? Because planets in the 12th house, their energies are also suppressed, right? They need an outlet. In the 12th house, because it's an unconscious house, most of the times, the way that we have access to planets in the 12th house is when we are in an unconscious, inebriated state. So when we're drinking, when we're smoking, when we're dreaming, right? That's when the 12th house Mars comes out. 12th house Mars is really tough for sleep. The 12th house rules your sleep. So when you have someone who has Mars in the 12th house, this person is going to have a restless spirit, and they're going to have a hard time staying asleep. They're going to wake up throughout the night multiple times. That's a 12th house Mars thing. Okay. It's because there's a lack of peace. There's a lack of spiritual peace in Mars in the 12th house, right? The 12th house is kind of like our spirit. It's our soul. It's our sleep. It's our dream world. When Mars is in the 12th, it disturbs all these things. Mars is a planet that disturbs. He creates anger, rage, conflict. Yes, ayahuasca would be good for him. But where does this Mars, when do we see this Mars come out? Mostly when he's drunk. And this is a very important thing to understand about 12th house placements, especially when it comes to alcohol, because we're going to see the worst of the 12th house, any 12th house placement come out when someone is inebriated or under the influence or drinking. So when he gets drunk, he gets angry. And he says this during the interview. He says, I had to sober up for my girl because I get really scary when I'm drunk, because he gets delusional when he's drunk. And we can see this in his chart where he starts to come up with false scenarios or things that didn't even happen. He starts seeing things that didn't happen or coming up with stories in his head around things that are happening that's very detached from reality when he's drunk. And this is because he has Mercury opposite Neptune. So Mercury is a planet of the mind. Neptune is a planet of delusion. Self is a planet of deception, right? Neptune distorts reality, is distorted reality. So when Neptune is touching Mercury between the 12th house and the 6th house, when he's drunk, 12th house things, his Mercury, his mind gets warped. His senses get warped. He's hearing things, he's seeing things, he's experiencing things that are kind of delusional. They're not grounded in reality, right? He may come up with the narrative or with the story around, the experience when he was drunk, but then he'll wake up the next day and be like, wait a minute, I don't even know if that was real or not. I don't know if that's what actually happened, So because he has Mercury opposite Neptune, whenever I see Neptune touching Mercury, Neptune touching the moon, or even Neptune opposite the sun, like the way Kanye West has, stay away from substances. Stay away from toxins. Do not put toxins in the body. Okay? No alcohol, no pills, no nothing. Neptune, if you're a Neptune person, like him, he's Neptune, right? He's a Neptunian guy because he has Neptune opposite his Mercury. So he is a Neptune person. If you want to be a clear Neptunian person, you got to go sober. There's no escaping or avoiding life. There's no escaping or avoiding reality, because otherwise Neptune will waste away at your consciousness. And this is one of the things I want you to understand. Neptunian people like himself, Neptune opposite Mercury, if you drink your entire life, by the time you get into your 50s and 60s, your consciousness, your mind, it's going to waste away. You're going to get dementia. You're going to get Alzheimer's. Because what Neptune does, especially when he's in aspect to Mercury or the moon or the sun, is he erodes and confuses and he slowly poisons that planet. He makes Mercury toxic. He makes the moon toxic. He makes the sun toxic. And you're drinking alcohol, you're putting substances in your body, right? And it's slowly distorting and eroding away at your sun, your Mercury, your moon. This is why, when people drink alcohol, if someone has a Neptune aspect to their sun, if they're an alcoholic, their identity gets all fucked up. Okay? When someone has Neptune an aspect to the Mercury and they drink alcohol, their mind gets all fucked up. When someone has Neptune an aspect to their moon, their emotions get all fucked up and weird when they're drinking. And they get sad, they get depressed, they get confused, but they also get what? Delusional. They get detached from reality and have a hard time grounding themselves, right? So that Neptune moon thing can be about delusional emotions. Neptune Mercury thing could be about delusional thoughts. Neptune sun thing could be about a delusional identity, not being able to see yourself clearly, right? Having a weird or thwarted self-perception, which eventually becomes the victim complex, because Neptune also creates victims, right? Neptune takes away our power. He takes away our victim energy. He makes us a victim for our circumstance. It's, Neptune, especially when you don't have a good relationship with Neptune, like him, Neptune opposite Mercury, it's like you can't be doing substances or drugs, right? Like, or you need to do them in a very intentional, mindful way, you know? Someone said my Pisces moon father, when he drank, he would literally shapeshift. Yeah, that's like having a moon in Pisces is like having like a moon being aspected by Neptune. It's a very similar thing. Someone said, "Wow, Louis, this is all resonating. Cool. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this." And Mars, what do you mean? Someone's asking about Mars. So, yeah. So the 12th house is also the house because it's the house of self-undoing. It also has a lot to do with substance abuse. So this axis, the 12th and the 6th, is all about habits and health, right? It's about self-care. So what is he here to learn? If we see Mercury, Venus in the 6th with Mars in the 12th, and we see this Mars Venus aspect, right? He's here to learn how to have healthy habits. Shia Labeouf, Mars in Capricorn, he's here to learn how to be disciplined and self-controlled with his habits, right? Neptune an aspect to Mars. That's going to be about energetic outages, you know. Um that's a wounded man thing as well. I'm getting like a wounded father with Neptune as. It depends on where Mars and Neptune are at. I'd have to see how it shows up in someone's chart because I don't really trying to think of an example of a Neptune Mars person. I can't really think of one. I'd have to take a look at that. Um, but yeah, so getting back to Shia's chart. So with Mars and Capricorn in the 12th house, whenever he drinks, he becomes very self-destructive and suicidal and angry. And he's going to also become very dangerous to women because that 12th house Mars is going to get activated. And all of a sudden it's Mars opposite Venus, you know, it's Mars opposite Venus that creates, so this aspect of Mars opposite Venus, Mars is the planet of war and anger and fighting and arguments, where Venus is the planet of love and relationships, right? So whenever you see this in someone's chart, Mars opposite Venus, you want to ask them about the relationships. You want to ask them about what they experience in relationships because this is going to create a lot of conflicts and arguments and fighting and power imbalances and rage. And it's going to be, this is a very emotionally triggering aspect when it comes to relationships. And I think the love for him triggers him. I just feel this so strongly for Shia LaBeouf. Love triggers his shadows, triggers his demons, triggers his anger. It brings out a side of him that's very vulnerable and very broken. I think he becomes this kind of broken, needy little boy when he's in love. I think, there's this very vulnerable, broken child, that shows up when he's in love, where he is afraid of abandonment. He's afraid of being left behind. He's afraid of being cheated on. Like, I think there's a lot of fear and a lot of, inner stuff that comes up for this guy when he's in a relationship. And the complexity of that is all because of the moon square Pluto, the moon trine Saturn, and Venus opposite Mars. His relational planets, moon and Venus, kind of being afflicted, and Venus also being in a challenging house, right? So whenever I see a man with a 6th house Venus, this is about subjugation of women, controlling of women, and kind of wanting a woman to serve him, right? I also think when men have Cancer placements like this, the Cancer Mercury, Cancer Venus, they're looking for a woman that's like a domestic energy. Like they're looking for like a stay-at-home wife type of energy. They may not know it or realize it, but that's actually what would be best for them and what they would need. It's the Cancer energy. It's the Cancer energy. So, all right, my loves. There's so much more here that we could go over. There's so much more. There's so much more here. But I got to do a reading, unfortunately, right now. So I got to get to. I'm working on a Sunday, and I'm doing a reading right now. I got a reading in a bit, so I gotta go in a bit. But I think there's so much more. Oh my God, I could go for days. There's so much more I kind of like want to discuss. We didn't even talk about like the LGBT thing and the sexuality thing, and him being possibly molested and stuff like that. We didn't even get there, but maybe we'll talk about that one day. But I really just wanted to speak to certain parts of his chart that really show us how or show us why he's such a complex individual. You know, I really wanted to break down his chart to show you guys why this is someone that what we may see on the outside is like popularity, fame, and stuff, but why this is someone who's so conflicted, so wounded, and why this is someone who's so contradictory. Okay. Um, because of what's happening with his sun and his moon, clearly, and these really tense aspects that he has between his planets. You know, this is not an easy chart. This is a very blessed chart, but it's not easy. This is a very lucky chart. It's a graceful chart, but it's not easy. This is a chart that's full of conflict. And this is a chart of someone who's going to be very refined in this lifetime, who's going to be broken down and crushed by the divine and by spirit in this lifetime, who's going to be kind of brought to their knees and who's going to be made to suffer in this lifetime to get to the core of their truth and to heal this deep wound that they have around the self, around ego and identity. Like, I want you to understand, this guy was given a chart that's meant to destroy him a little bit. This is a chart that he was gifted so that he could become his true authentic self. But the journey there is going to be painful. He's going to be met with anger. He's going to have to confront his anger. He's going to have to confront his rage. He's going to have to confront his jealousy. He's going to have to confront his childhood traumas. He's going to have to confront his control issues. He's going to have to confront all the fragility of his ego, and he's going to be broken down. I mean, he's already, look at him. Look at the man. I mean, go watch that interview. That he's literally like, he just looks sad and broken. And it makes so much sense. Because why? He has a sun conjunct Chiron. The wounded man, the broken man, the wounded father. I also think he's an archetype of the wounded father. He has a wounded father. He is a wounded father. His child's going to experience a wounded father. Sun conjunct Chiron, Whatever planets are being aspected by our Chiron or that are close to our Chiron, we're also going to have a wound around that planet. So some people are very Chiron people. They have a deep wound around their woundedness. There's degrees. Yeah, he has a daughter. He has a daughter who's like 2 or 3 or something. He's a dad. There are degrees of woundedness that people have. But some people are a little bit more wounded than others because they are an epitome of Chiron, right? And so for Shia, I think his journey is about sharing his own complex healing journey with himself, with other men, or with the people. I think that's why he has Sun Chiron together. I think his journey, his healing is going to happen, or it's already happening, by putting himself on display and showing people the true, raw, authentic Shia. No filters, which is what we got with that interview. We got to see who he really is. Who is Shia Labeouf behind the celebrity? He is this deep, wounded, broken, fragile little boy. That's who he really is. He's a broken, fragile, wounded little boy that always wanted to be celebrated by his mother and his father, that always wanted to feel safe growing up, but he never felt safe. He was never given stability or security. He kind of feels taken advantage of them a little bit. He feels a little used by them. He feels betrayed by them, for sure. Okay. And this manifests in why he has such a hard time in staying present and stable and committed in relationships, because his mom and his dad never gave him safety or security. They never gave him that stability, right? Sun opposite Uranus, dad was always coming and going, Venus and Mercury and Cancer in the 6th house, mom was always working, right? So it's like, this is someone Leo moon, fifth house sun, who needed a lot of attention, who needed, parents that are very present. He wanted to have a little bit of a codependent relationship on his mom, seventh house moon, right? But he never got that. And so what he's dealing with now and what he's having to investigate and explore is this broken little boy within him that always wanted his dad to be there and show up for him. And he's never did, right? He wanted, he always wanted that autograph, right? From what's his name? What's that baseball player? What was that baseball player's name that he mentioned? I forgot. Anyways, he always wanted to get that autograph from him, and he never got it. He never got that autograph, and he has a wound around that. It's so funny, right? Because if you think about the axis of Gemini and Sag, has a lot to do with sports, and that Mike Piazza, right? Sag and Gemini, especially Sag is a sign of athletics and sports, right? It's a very athletic sign, and you'll see this with people that are Sag rising, have Saturn, Uranus, and Sag. I have Saturn, Uranus, and Sag, right? Or people that have Sag placement, Sag moon, things like this. They're very athletic. They're into sports. They love sports, right? So he would go to these Dodger games, and what did he want? Look at this, Gemini. He wanted a signature writing, Gemini. From one of his favorite sports, Uranus, Saturn, and Sag, celebrities, Sun and Gemini, right? Saturn and Sag in the 11th house. He had a celebrity, Mike Piazza, that he was a fan of, and he always got rejected by him. And all he wanted, Gemini, was a signature. He wanted an autograph, and he never got it. And he showed up consistently, weekend over weekend, 6 house things. I'm showing up every day, 6 house things every day. I'm showing up every day. I'm showing up every day, and I'm getting rejected. I'm not getting the signature. And this literally speaks to, it's an internalization or it's a mirroring of the rejection of the father that he experienced. It's a reflection and a mirroring of the rejection of the father that he experienced. That's what that whole thing with Mike Piazza was about. Can you guys hear me still? All right, my loves. We're going to wrap it up here. We've been going for 2 hours. We can go a lot more. Maybe one of the things that we'll do, because what I wanted to do as well is I wanted to go into his transits, and I want to talk about timing of events, like when he went through that thing with Twigs, the recent interview that he did, the crazy stuff that happened at Mardi Gras. I literally want to show you guys this in the chart, timing wise, with the transits, because it's so fascinating to see. Are you guys lost sound? Okay. Hold on, you guys. Wait, hold on. Okay. I know, I lost sound. Someone called me. I'm just writing to my people in here. Oh, I'm back? Okay, cool. I'm back. Okay. All right, it's on? Okay, cool. All right, sorry about that. Someone called. My clients are calling me, so I gotta get to that reading. But yeah, what we're gonna do is we'll do a part 2 where we're gonna go over his transits. We'll talk about timing of events that he's kind of gone through over the last 8-9 years, because the last 8-9 years for him have been very pivotal, and it has a lot to do with the transits that he was experiencing. And then we'll talk a little bit more about his chart as well. And yeah, okay. So we'll do that. That'll be part 2. All right. But I love you all so much. Everybody that was, hanging out today and was, giving their feedback or sharing their insights and stuff. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and save this on Instagram, and it's also going to be posted to YouTube. So if you guys want to go back, rewatch it on YouTube, you can. On YouTube, it's nice because you'll be able to see my beautiful face as well. Okay. But I love you all so much. Have a good Sunday. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the week ahead forecast as well. Tap into my stories to get a time for that. And we'll do more of these. We'll do more of these where we're kind of, taking a look at celebrity charts or taking a look at people's charts, to kind of understand them a little bit, because I think the beauty of astrology is it allows us to see who people really are. And I think many of us, we only see the surface level. Like we only see as the public, we only see the surface level of like people, right? Um, we only see the surface level of people, but astrology and looking at someone's chart really allows us to get into the nitty gritty, and it really allows us to get deep and really see who someone is beyond just the surface or beyond just what the media shows us. So, okay, my loves, and it also allows us to understand people, and I think that's what we all want, right? We all want to be understood and to understand. And I think one of the beautiful things astrology does is it gives us the ability to understand someone, to deeply see and understand someone, if we're able to decode the magic of the chart, right? But all right, my loves, take care. I'll see you guys. Bye. How do I end this? How do I end this? Okay, right here.